She was tortured for months. Starved, burned, carved with words. But the most chilling part? The hands that hurt Sylvia Likens weren't those of a stranger, or even just one monster. They belonged to children, neighbor kids, as young as 10 years old, and they did it all under the command of a single mother, Gertrude Banaszewski. How does an ordinary woman turn a house full of children into accomplices for murder? Indianapolis, 1965. A teenage girl named Sylvia Likens is found dead in a basement, her body covered in burns, bruises, and carvings. But what's even more chilling, the ones who tortured her weren't strangers. They were neighborhood kids, led by a single mother, Gertrude Banaszewski. Today, we unravel how an ordinary woman turned children into accomplices of murder. It started with a simple arrangement. Summer 1965. Sylvia Likens, 16 years old, bright-eyed, trusting, arrives at Gertrude Banaszewski's Indianapolis home with her younger sister, Jenny. Their parents were carnival workers, constantly on the road, desperate for stability. They paid Gertrude $20 a week to keep the girls safe. Just $20. For 2 young lives. At first, it seemed ordinary. A cramped house with peeling paint, no running water, and a brood of kids. Gertrude played the role, the overburdened single mother taking in strays out of kindness. Sylvia wrote hopeful letters home, calling it fine, but cracks appeared fast. Gertrude's resentment simmered. Sylvia wasn't grateful enough. She was too pretty, too innocent, too alive. So Gertrude began whispering lies, sharp, poisonous little daggers aimed straight at Sylvia's character. She stole from me. She's spreading filthy lies about your father. She called you stupid. She branded Sylvia a rebellious liar and a whore. Words designed to spark outrage in her own children and the neighborhood kids who flocked to her kitchen. Suddenly, every broken dish, every missing coin, every sideways glance was Sylvia's fault. Gertrude wasn't just punishing Sylvia. She was building an army against her, isolating her, making her a target, turning the very children who should have been Sylvia's friends into her jailers. This wasn't random cruelty. This was strategy. Cold, calculated, and terrifyingly effective. By the time Sylvia realized she was trapped, the walls weren't just made of wood and plaster. They were made of Gertrude's lies and the children who believed them. The worst bully you've ever known. Then imagine that bully wasn't a kid in a schoolyard, but a grown woman, a mother. And she didn't use fists first. She used something far more dangerous, the slow, steady drip of control. Gertrude Banaszewski didn't start by beating Sylvia Likens. Not at first. That would have been too loud, too obvious. Instead, she began with small, quiet cruelties, the kind that leave no bruises but shatter a person from the inside out. It started with humiliation. Simple, cutting acts designed to strip away Sylvia's dignity. Gertrude would force her to undress in front of the other children. Not for punishment, not for any reason at all, just because she could. Sylvia would stand there, trembling, exposed, while Gertrude's kids and the neighborhood children watched and snickered. It was a game to them, a show. To Sylvia, it was the first crack in her world. Then came the isolation. Gertrude locked Sylvia in the basement for hours, days sometimes. No light, no blanket, just the damp concrete and the spiders. She'd tell the others Sylvia was being punished for talking back or stealing bread. But Sylvia hadn't done anything. It was a test for everyone. Could Gertrude make a child disappear? Could she make the others forget Sylvia was human? And then, the hunger. Gertrude began denying Sylvia food. A slice of bread, a glass of water, things so small. They seemed harmless. But when you're 16 and growing, hunger isn't just physical. It's a voice in your head telling you you're worthless, unwanted, deserving of nothing. Gertrude knew this. She'd eat in front of Sylvia, let the smell of soup or fried potatoes hang in the air while Sylvia's stomach cramped. Sometimes, she'd forget to feed her for days. Other times, she'd make Sylvia beg for scraps. And when Sylvia did, Gertrude would laugh. See how greedy she is. But humiliation, isolation, hunger, these were just the warm-up. Gertrude's real weapon wasn't violence. It was lies. She spun stories like poison. She told the children Sylvia had stolen money from her purse, that Sylvia called them stupid behind their backs, that she'd cursed their mother. The lies grew darker, wilder. Gertrude claimed Sylvia was a prostitute, that she'd slept with men for money, that she had diseases. Don't touch her, she'd warn. You'll get sick. Why tell such horrible things? Because Gertrude needed a reason. An excuse. She was building a story where Sylvia wasn't a victim. She was a villain, a threat. And in that story, Gertrude wasn't a torturer. She was a hero, a mother protecting her children from a dirty, lying, disease-ridden girl. And slowly, the children started to believe it. Kids trust adults. It's how we're wired. When a parent says something's true, you believe them, especially if that parent is all you have. Gertrude's own children, Paula, Stephanie, Johnny, had no father, no steady life, just Gertrude. She was their world. And if Mom said Sylvia was evil, well, then she must be. The neighborhood kids believed it too. Gertrude's house was a magnet for children, a place where rules were loose and candy was handed out freely. Gertrude played the cool mom, the understanding mom. She'd listen to their problems, give them snacks, let them hang out. To them, she was safe, an authority. So when she pointed at Sylvia and whispered, "She's dangerous," they nodded. When she said, "She needs to be taught a lesson," they agreed. And that's when Gertrude added the final tool, permission. She didn't command the children to hurt Sylvia. Not yet. She suggested it. Someone should smack her for stealing. If I were you, I wouldn't let her talk to you like that. She'd leave a belt on the table, a hot poker near the stove, a silent invitation. Then came the rewards. A child who shoved Sylvia got an extra cookie. One who yelled at her got praised. "You're brave. You know right from wrong." Gertrude was careful. She never said, "Hit her." She'd say, "Show her what happens to liars." Or, "Make her sorry." And the children, hungry for approval, eager to please, desperate not to be the next target, started playing along. A push became a slap became a punch became a kick. And with every step, Gertrude nodded, smiled. "That's it. Show her." The lies grew deeper roots. If Sylvia flinched when a boy raised his hand, Gertrude would sneer. "See, she's guilty." If Sylvia cried, she'd snap. "Crocodile tears. She's faking." The children stopped seeing Sylvia's pain. They saw proof of Gertrude's stories. And Sylvia? She stopped fighting back, stopped speaking, stopped looking up. This is what psychologists call learned helplessness. When cruelty becomes so constant, so inescapable, you shut down. You don't scream because no one hears you. You don't run because there's nowhere to go. You just disappear inside yourself. Gertrude had turned her home into a laboratory of control. The basement wasn't just a room. It was a stage where Sylvia's humanity was erased. The children weren't just bystanders. They were students, learning a terrible lesson, that hurting someone isn't just okay. It's right if an authority figure says so. And Gertrude was always there, watching, directing, rewarding, never getting her own hands dirty. Not yet. She'd sit in her kitchen, smoking, listening to the sounds from below, a thud, a whimper, laughter, and she'd feel powerful, in control. But this was just the beginning. Because once Gertrude had her army believing the lies, once they were numb to Sylvia's pain, that's when she handed them the matches, the cigarettes, the needles, the words carved into skin. It didn't happen overnight. It happened one small permission at a time, one lie at a time, one hungry, lonely, humiliated day at a time. That's the terrifying truth about control. It rarely starts with a scream. It starts with a whisper. Close your eyes. Think back to when you were 12. The things you worried about, homework, crushes, whether your friends liked you. Now imagine being 12 and holding a cigarette to a girl's skin because an adult told you to. How does that happen? How do children become torturers? The truth is almost too ugly to say out loud. At least 10 children helped hurt Sylvia Likens. Gertrude's own kids, Paula, 17, Stephanie, 12, Johnny, just 10 years old. Neighbor kids, Ricky Hobbs, 15, Coy Hubbard, 15, Mike Monroe, 13, Judy Duke, 11 years old. Kids who should have been riding bikes, playing baseball. Instead, they burned her, beat her, carved words into her stomach. So how did Gertrude turn ordinary children into monsters? It started with survival. See, Gertrude didn't just target Sylvia. She ruled her house like a dictator. One wrong look, one muttered word, and you became the enemy. Her own daughter Paula later said, "It was like walking on broken glass, never knowing what would set her off." So when Gertrude pointed at Sylvia and screamed, "Punish her," the children faced a choice, hurt Sylvia or become her. And Gertrude made sure they knew the cost of saying no. When Ricky Hobbs refused to hit Sylvia, Gertrude flew into a rage. "You coward," she spat. Then she turned to the others. "Look at him. Scared of a dirty little whore." Ricky was shoved outside. Locked out. Humiliated. The message was clear: disobey, and you're next. But fear was only half the trap. The other half, reward. Gertrude understood kids, knew what they craved: praise, attention, a bag of chips, a cold Coke. So she dangled them like prizes. If you slapped Sylvia, good boy. If you kicked her, have some candy. If you called her a filthy pig, Gertrude would smile, ruffling your hair like you'd won a spelling bee. She turned cruelty into currency. And the children, starved for love in that broken home, started paying. Stephanie, her 12-year-old, would strut after hitting Sylvia, basking in her mother's approval. Little Johnny, just 10, learned fast, make Sylvia scream, make mom proud. Neighbor kids like Judy Duke, 11, joined in, eager for Gertrude's attention. It became a game, a terrible, twisted game where the rules were simple. The more you hurt Sylvia, the more you mattered. Then came the dares. Gertrude would lean close to a child, her voice dripping with mockery. "Bet you're too scared to make her cry." Or, "Mike's braver than you. He's not afraid." It was peer pressure weaponized. No kid wants to be called chicken. No teen wants to look weak. So they'd step up, shove harder, hit louder, prove themselves. And Sylvia? She stopped being human to them. Gertrude made sure of that. She forced Sylvia to act like a dog, barking, eating off the floor, called her it instead of she, made her thank the children when they hit her. "Say you're grateful," Gertrude would demand. And Sylvia, broken and starving, would whisper, "Thank you for punishing me." That's how you make a child torture another child. Step 1. Make the victim less than human. Step 2. Make cruelty feel normal. Step 3. Make refusal feel dangerous. Soon, the basement became a playground of pain. Kids would come over after school not to play tag, but to discipline Sylvia. Gertrude gave them tools, belts, paddles, lit cigarettes. They'd take turns, laughing, daring each other. "Can you make her bleed? I bet you can't make her scream." Ricky Hobbs, 15, started reluctant, ended up burning Sylvia with cigarettes while she begged for water. Judy Duke, 11, helped hold Sylvia down as Gertrude carved, "I'm a prostitute," into her stomach. Stephanie Banasuski, 12, threw scalding water on Sylvia's legs while singing. Why? Because Gertrude made it easy. She never forced them. She invited them, made hurting Sylvia feel like joining a club. A secret, powerful club where mom was the leader. And children, desperate to belong, terrified of being cast out, joined. They traded their innocence for a place at Gertrude's table, for a moment of feeling strong instead of scared. But here's what they didn't see. Every time they hit Sylvia, Gertrude's power grew. Every laugh, every taunt, every burn made them more trapped. Because now they weren't just witnesses. They were accomplices. Coy Hubbard, 15, realized this too late. He joined in, beating Sylvia with a belt. But one night, he saw her curled on the basement floor, naked, shivering, her skin covered in burns and bruises. And he broke. He ran to his basketball coach, sobbing, "We killed her. We killed that girl." That's the poison Gertrude planted. She didn't just destroy Sylvia. She destroyed these children too. Because after Sylvia's body was found, after the police came, those kids had to wake up, had to realize what they'd done, not because they were evil, but because a monster taught them that cruelty was kindness, that torture was love, and that's the deepest wound of all. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing in the world is a child who believes they're doing right. Me ask you something. Would you electrocute a stranger if a scientist told you to? In the 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram asked ordinary people to do just that. They sat at a machine with switches labeled danger, severe shock. A man in a lab coat told them to flip the switches when someone in another room answered questions wrong. Even when they heard screams of pain, most kept shocking that stranger. Why? Because authority rewires our brains. Milgram called it the agentic shift. The moment we surrender our conscience to someone we see as powerful, we stop being thinking, feeling humans. We become agents, tools. I was just following orders. Now picture Gertrude Banasuski's living room. She didn't wear a lab coat. She wore a house dress, smoked cheap cigarettes, called herself mom. But to the children in that house, she was just as powerful as Milgram's scientist. More, even, because she was their world. and she staged her own experiments. Every few days, Gertrude held trials. She'd sit in her armchair like a judge. The children stood around her. Sylvia knelt in the center, dirty, bruised, trembling. Gertrude would point. Stephanie, tell us what Sylvia stole. Johnny, did you hear her call me a liar? The kids would lie, not because they were evil, because Gertrude demanded it. Tell the truth. She'd snap, but the truth was whatever she wanted. If a child hesitated, Gertrude's eyes would lock onto them. Well, did she or didn't she? So they'd nod, whisper, yes, Mom, she did it. And just like that, Sylvia was guilty. Gertrude made the rules. She was judge, jury, and executioner. When the trial ended, she'd deliver the sentence. 10 burns for stealing. Make her eat soap for lying. She wants to be filthy? Treat her like an animal. The children obeyed, not because they wanted to, because Gertrude made cruelty feel like justice. That's the first poison, authority. Kids are wired to trust adults, especially parents. When Mom says jump, you jump. When she says Sylvia is a criminal, you believe her. When she says punish her, you do it. Your own doubts? Your stomach-churning guilt? You shove them down. Mom knows best. But authority wasn't enough. Gertrude needed something darker. She needed to erase Sylvia's humanity. Psychologists call this dehumanization. It's how soldiers kill in war. How mobs lynch innocents. You stop seeing a person. You see a thing. A target. A gook. A rat. A dirty criminal. Gertrude taught the children to see Sylvia as less than human. She forced Sylvia to bark like a dog, eat off the floor, lick her own urine from the concrete. She banned her name, called her it or the girl. She spread lies. She has diseases. Don't touch her. She's a prostitute. She's filthy. And the children learned. They stopped seeing Sylvia's flinches as pain. They saw guilt. Her tears weren't sadness, they were manipulation. Her flinching when a boy raised his hand? See, she's scared because she's guilty. The most horrific acts became normal. One day, Gertrude ordered Sylvia to eat her own feces. The children watched. No one gasped. No one ran for help. Why? Because Gertrude framed it as punishment. Because Sylvia was no longer a girl. She was a thing, a criminal, a pile of garbage to be broken. But there's one last piece, the group. Cruelty alone is hard. Cruelty together? Easy. When you're in a pack, the unthinkable becomes thinkable. You look around. Everyone's nodding. Everyone's joining in, laughing. So you laugh too. You don't want to be the weak one, the traitor, the coward. Gertrude weaponized this. She'd gather the children. Who wants to punish Sylvia first? Hands shot up. Kids shoved forward. If one held back, she'd smirk. What's wrong? Too good for us. So they'd step up, grab a belt, light a cigarette, and in that group, Sylvia's suffering became entertainment. They'd take turns burning her, betting, I can make her scream louder than you. They'd force her to dance naked while they clapped. Humiliation became a sport. Pain became a game. Why? Because in groups, we mirror, we copy, we disappear into the crowd. Ricky Hobbs, 15, later said, it felt like a dream, like none of it was real. That's the trance of obedience. Gertrude rewired their reality. She turned a basement in Indianapolis into a pocket universe where right was wrong, where torture was duty, where a crying child was getting what she deserved. But here's what haunts me. This wasn't magic. It wasn't supernatural. It was psychology. Strip away the horror, and you see the gears turning. Authority, Gertrude as mom. Dehumanization, Sylvia as it. Group pressure, no one wants to be the outcast. Together, they created a monster factory. Ordinary kids became weapons because Gertrude understood 3 terrible truths. Children trust blindly. Cruelty feels right when it's deserved. No one wants to stand alone. So when 10-year-old Johnny Banasuski pressed a lit cigarette into Sylvia's palm, while she slept, he wasn't a demon. He was a child who believed his mother. And that's the real monster here. Not the evil we choose, but the evil we're taught to love. By October 1965, Sylvia Likens wasn't a prisoner anymore. She was a ghost, 16 years old, weighing barely 70 pounds. Her ribs pressed against skin like ladders. Her eyes were hollow. She hadn't spoken in days, just curled in the basement corner, shivering, waiting. But Gertrude wasn't done. She handed a sewing needle to her daughter Paula. Brand her, she ordered, so everyone knows what she is. Paula heated the needle over a candle flame, held it steady, then pressed it into Sylvia's stomach. The smell of burning skin filled the basement. Sylvia didn't scream. She'd run out of screams weeks ago. When the needle cooled, Gertrude took it. She carved 4 words into Sylvia's flesh. Slow, deliberate, like carving a pumpkin. I'm a prostitute. The children watched. Some laughed nervously. Others stared at the floor. But no one stopped it. No one said, "This is wrong," because after months of beatings, starvation, and lies, this was just the next step. Sylvia became a living billboard for Gertrude's hate. But Gertrude wasn't the only one holding the needle. Ricky Hobbs, 15, later admitted helping hold Sylvia down. Judy Duke, 11, watched from the stairs. Little Johnny Banasuski, just 10 years old, saw his mother carve those words and thought, "She deserves it." That's how deep the poison ran. For 3 days after the carving, Sylvia drifted. Her wounds festered. She soiled herself. Couldn't stand. Couldn't swallow. Gertrude would kick her awake. Stop faking. But Sylvia wasn't faking. Her body was shutting down. On October 26th, Gertrude found her unconscious. Blue lips. Shallow breath. For a moment, even Gertrude panicked. She ordered the kids, "Clean her up. Make her move." They dragged Sylvia to the shower, scrubbed her raw, poured cold water on her face. Sylvia opened her eyes, whispered one word, "Please." Gertrude just sneered. "She's fine. Put her back." They carried Sylvia to the basement, laid her on the cold concrete, closed the door, and Sylvia Likens died alone. Not fighting, not raging, just gone. When Gertrude found the body hours later, she didn't scream, didn't cry. She called the children downstairs, pointed at Sylvia's lifeless form. "Look what you did. Not we, you." Then came the cover-up. Gertrude made them scrub the basement, bleach the floor, wash the blood off the walls. She coached them like a director. Tell people she ran away. Say she hit her head. She even wrote a fake note, sloppy. Desperate scribbles. "I've been a bad girl. I'm leaving." The children obeyed, scraped Sylvia's blood from the cracks in the concrete, bundled her clothes to burn. They were still scrubbing when Coy Hubbard snapped. Coy was 15, big for his age, a basketball player. He'd hit Sylvia, burned her, helped hold her down, but seeing her body, cold, stiff, the words "I'm a prostitute" staring up at him, he ran, not to the police, to his coach, Bill Flora, a man he trusted. Coy burst into the gym, sobbing, covered in bleach. "Coach, we killed her. We killed that girl." He couldn't say Sylvia's name, couldn't look up, just kept repeating, "She's in the basement. We hurt her so bad." Coach Flora drove to the police. Officers found Sylvia's body wrapped in a blanket. The basement reeked of bleach and decay. When they lifted the blanket, the coroner said it was the worst thing he'd seen in 30 years. Burns covered 70% of her body, bruises layered over bruises. The carved words gaped like a second mouth on her stomach. But the real horror wasn't the wounds. It was the ordinary house around her. Dishes in the sink, homework on the table, a child's drawing pinned to the fridge. This wasn't a dungeon. It was a home. And the people who did this weren't demons. They were neighbors, kids who played kickball, a mom who baked cookies. Gertrude was watching TV when police arrested her. She didn't resist, just lit another cigarette. Sylvia fell down the stairs. She shrugged. Kids lie. But the children cracked fast. Ricky Hobbs confessed first, then Judy Duke, then Stephanie Banasuski, 12 years old, whispering, "Mommy made us do it." The web of lies unraveled in hours. And Indianapolis asked itself, how did we not hear her? How did no neighbor hear the screams? How did no teacher see the burns? How did no doctor question the broken bones? The answer was as ugly as the crime. Because Sylvia had been erased long before she died. Gertrude didn't just kill a girl. She made her invisible, turned her into a problem child, a liar, a whore. So when Sylvia vanished, people shrugged, probably ran off with some boy. That's the final, brutal lesson. Monsters don't need darkness to hide. They need us to look away. Sylvia Likens' last word was please. Her last breath was alone. But her last truth? Carved in her own skin. Proof that in the end, even after everything, Gertrude still had to silence her with a lie. Gertrude Banasuski walked into court wearing a neat blue dress. Her hair was curled. She looked like somebody's grandmother. Not a monster. Not a killer. Just ordinary. When the judge said guilty of first-degree murder, she didn't flinch, didn't cry, just stared ahead, cold and quiet. They gave her life in prison. No parole. Ever. The children weren't so lucky. Paula Banaszewski, 17, Gertrude's oldest, got life too, reduced to 20 years later. Ricky Hobbs and Coy Hubbard, both 15, went to reform school until they turned 21. Stephanie Banaszewski, just 12, spent years in juvenile detention. Little Johnny, only 10, sent away to a state home. Judy Duke, 11, vanished into the foster system. On paper, justice was served, but in their heads, the real sentence was just beginning. Coy Hubbard, the boy who broke and told his coach, tried to forget, changed his name, moved states, but neighbors recognized him. Aren't you that kid who? He'd walk away. Never answered. Ricky Hobbs served his time, became a firefighter, saved lives. But at night, he'd dream of Sylvia's basement, the smell of bleach, the way she whispered please. He'd wake up sweating. Guilt doesn't care about prison sentences. Stephanie Banaszewski got out at 18, changed her name, disappeared, like smoke. And Gertrude? She sat in her cell for 30 years, never apologized, never showed remorse, died in 1990, forgotten. But here's what sticks in your throat. Why? Why did they do it? Why did ordinary kids who played tag, did homework, loved their pets, become torturers? Psychologists have spent decades picking apart this nightmare. They point to 3 poison threads Gertrude wove together. First, trust. Kids are born to believe adults, especially parents. When mom says jump, you jump. When she says that girl is evil, you believe her. Your brain isn't wired to question. It's wired to obey. Gertrude knew this, used it, made cruelty feel like duty. Second, isolation. Sylvia had no one, no parents nearby, no friends in the neighborhood. Gertrude made sure of that. She cut Sylvia off from the world, made her invisible. And when someone has no voice, no allies, they stop being human to others. They become a thing, a target. Third, the pack. Ever been dared to do something stupid? Jump off the roof, kiss that boy, steal that candy. Now imagine the dare comes from an adult. And the stakes aren't embarrassment, they're survival. Gertrude turned Sylvia's torture into a group activity, a test of loyalty. If you don't hit her, you're weak. You're next. Mix those together. Trust plus isolation plus pack pressure equals a perfect storm of evil. But the deepest wound wasn't on Sylvia's skin. It was on those children's souls. One investigator put it bluntly. Gertrude didn't just kill Sylvia. She murdered those children's innocence too. Think about Johnny Banaszewski, 10 years old. He should have been learning fractions, riding bikes. Instead, he learned to burn a girl with cigarettes, to laugh while she cried. Gertrude didn't just steal his childhood. She poisoned it. Or Judy Duke, 11, after the trial. She stopped speaking for a year, just silent, trapped in a nightmare she helped create. And that's the unanswered question that haunts this story. Where does the guilt belong? With Gertrude? Absolutely. But what about the others? The neighbors who heard screams and ignored them? The teachers who saw bruises and looked away? The system that let a broken woman take in children for $20 a week? Sylvia's own sister, Jenny, who lived in that house, later said, "I survived by staying quiet, by pretending not to see, and I'll regret that until I die. We want monsters to be easy, to have fangs, red eyes." But Gertrude had wrinkles, a smoker's cough. She packed school lunches. We want evil to be rare, distant. But this happened in a blue-collar neighborhood, on a street with porch swings and barking dogs. And we want children to be innocent. Always. But these kids held the matches. Maybe that's why Sylvia's story claws at us. It forces us to ask, what would I have done? If I were Jenny, would I have stayed silent to survive? If I were Coy, would I have broken and told? If I were a neighbor, would I have knocked on the door? There are no clean answers. Only Sylvia, buried in a quiet cemetery in Indiana. Her gravestone reads, "Loving daughter and sister." No mention of the carved words. No mention of the basement. Just Sylvia, a girl who loved cats, who wrote letters to her parents saying, "I'm fine," who deserved so much more than please. And the rest of us? Left staring into the dark, wondering how thin the line really is between a good kid and a killer. Sylvia's story isn't just about one evil woman. It's about how easily ordinary people, especially children, can be led into darkness. Gertrude didn't have supernatural powers. She had control, charisma, and a willingness to exploit the vulnerable. And that's the warning, because in the right conditions, Any of us could be Sylvia, but in the wrong conditions, we might just be one of the kids holding the cigarette,